Today is December 7th, 2009. My name is Chris Reedy. I'm the interviewer. With me today is Dr. Raymond Dean. We're on the campus of Ball State University and part of the oral history workshop. We're interviewing Vietnam veterans and those that served during the Vietnam era for this workshop and also for archival purposes. Okay. Dr. Dean, if you can tell us briefly just some basic information. What branch of service did you serve in?
Well, it was the United States Army for, if I could, it was the Army Security Agency, and it wasn't really clear. It was part of the Army. Well, let's just say that.
Okay. You ended up in the Army Security Agency, obviously, and you were deployed to Vietnam. But if I can back up just a little bit and maybe talk about, did you volunteer for service or were you drafted?
Well, that's another problem with question. I volunteered for the draft, and in doing so, you are not as necessarily gated for light weapons infantry, which is not the best place you want to be in any engagement. So I volunteered for the draft.
So by doing so, you felt you had some agency, some control over what you were going to be tasked to do in the Army?
Yes.
When you entered the Army in 1967, I believe?
Yes.
How old were you?
I believe I was 18.
Did you come straight out of high school, or did you have any college education?
No, I had 2 years of college at NYU, and then some difficulties arose with my father, and I decided to. Well, I was asked to come home and see if I could help out, and doing so. I had a 1Y, which in those days is a deferment because of school. Well, they said if you could leave to do that, then the 1Y is not going to continue. So I was expecting a letter from Johnson, but I never got it. But it was on its way, and so I decided to volunteer for the draft. I tried to get back in school, but that really wasn't possible. I had a full scholarship, and it was a lot to lose. So I was concerned with that.
What were you studying in school?
NYU had just started. I'd just started maybe 2 or 3 years into studies of neuroscience, and that's what I'm doing now. I got there in a rather different way. What they were, the position in the program was. Less of a clinical position. In other words, I wouldn't necessarily go on to see patients or do clinical sorts of things. It was the study of neuroscience, and it was put together for someone who was going to go on to graduate work.
When you entered the service, were you tested, and did you test well that you could have even more control over what your military occupation was going to be?
They had a test that you had to take. Yes, apparently I did quite well. I was a merit scholar, so with that, and apparently the score I got on this test, there was another fellow who came in, and he said he was with the Army Security Agency, and he wondered if I would be interested in this, and gave me a little idea of what it was all about, although not enough to make you you wouldn't make a decision like that to buy a new car. No less go away with this man. But it was non-combative. He said, and I guess it was. You could choose to not shoot at them when they were coming after you, but it was a non-combative sort of position.
Did it appeal to you intellectually?
Oh, of course. I figured a lot of people have a lot of things, and I thought I was rather bright, by comparison. And so I said, if I can go to school here, any kind of school, I'd really rather do that than other things that they have in mind. So yeah, it appealed maybe.
How early was that in your basic training? Was that very early on, or as you?
No, it wasn't in basic training. It was before I ever went in, because I had to sign special papers so that they could start the. I already had a secret. I worked for General Electric for a while, and they made some sort of thing that was extruded or something. But you had to have a secret clearance for that, and I have no idea why, but so I had a secret clearance, or the beginnings of one, and that takes quite a while for them to do. So if I already had a secret to go in this, you needed a top secret crypto clearance, and so it didn't take that long. So I had that all worked out, which was thankful, by the end of basic training, which was 8 weeks long. And
as you were progressing through basic training, knowing that you were going to go on to a non-combative field or something,
it really, if you really had to be less than brilliant to believe this was to believe this was a non-combatant fit. Yeah, but yeah, I was pleased that I was not going to end up in, well, the worst thing would be light weapons infantry, and that would be that at MOS. What's going to happen to you, unless you might go to Germany, or had a friend who was OJT lifeguard in Hawaii at an officers club, and I didn't expect that kind of thing.
What additional schooling, when you finished your basic training, what schooling or training did you have beyond that to prepare for this Army Security Agency?
Right. I went from Fort Dix, where I had my basic training, to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, which is up on a mountain in Massachusetts, not that far from Boston. And Devens was all Army Security Agency. Different types of people. All of it had to do with communications. There were ditty boppers, as they were called, and they learned how to take code and how to do that sort of thing. We had another group that went to, and I could have done this if I wanted to sign up for another couple of years, Monterey, California, to take language. I figured that was a long, and I didn't really want to learn Mandarin, which would have been of little or no help. Or although I'm led to believe it was, and in fact there were Chinese on the other side for a while. So went to Fort Devens. There were also people called traffic analysts, and that's what I was. That was thought. I didn't know if I was going to count cars or whatever, but the traffic was more along the lines of radio communications, and there were basically what you had is someone who was listening to code, and then you had someone was breaking the code down the best they could, and we had an individual then who had that language ability, and then would give that information to the traffic analyst. The traffic analyst is also then working with other traffic analysts, and triangulation is something that was tried to do, that we attempted to do, but it wasn't as easy as it sounds. Triangulation means we'd have a group of people over here and a group of people over here, and we're listening to what comes in, and then we are able to figure out where the basic command structure is, and that's not as easy as you think. And you have to figure out who's talking to who more than talking to that one. Now the traffic analyst then goes then calls upstairs, which is at that time many times it was NSA. Which never even existed at that period of time, according to the United States. But NSA was also keeping track of what everyone else was calling in, just so that we weren't calling in bombers on some place that really we shouldn't have. So it would go to them. And then there would be a decision made, and we would call in bombers to take that place out, wherever that was. Now we had a lot of had a lot of people with us. I'm going farther than the question you asked me, and I shouldn't do that. Where do you want me to be? I was
just wondering how long that training took. And then when you found out you were going to be deployed to Vietnam, I wanted to explore that. I
didn't know I was going to be deployed to Vietnam necessarily. The Army Security Agency had, it doesn't exist anymore, but it's part of the Army now. And the reason it's part of the Army now is because as Army Security Agency we were spies, and we couldn't go overseas according to the Geneva Convention as spies, so they sent us over as all different kinds of things. Anyway, it's all over the world, and I imagine, how the hell long it's been since I've been there. Heaven knows what they've got now. But there is we had a number of units in Vietnam. We had in Ankara, Turkey. Was a big site. Azmir, Ethiopia. There were a number of places you could have gotten sent. So it wasn't as And we were also in Korea. So you didn't necessarily know that Vietnam was the place you were going to end up.
I noticed that it's the 265th ASA, Army Security Agency, and also a /RRC, Radio Research.
Yes. Well, that's what
company.
They called us. That's what they called. Did you know that?
Cover that they used. When you were
I mean, who would believe that? We were out in the middle. I was in Phu. Who the hell would believe that we're researching radios in the middle of Vietnam? But that's what we're called. We didn't have we had no names on our uniforms, and we didn't have dog tags either. It was really a mess because Phu was quite a large. I mean, you don't hear of it now because they've wiped it away. If you can Google it, and you just see nothing there just their runways where they came in. But Phu, at first we had 4,000 Marines guarding us, and they never really cared for us much. And And then there was some kind of thing going on, but we had to, we had to get the Army in there, and the 101st came in, and then the 82nd came in, and so we were part of them. It was difficult for the Marine Corps to tell us what to do. It was bad, but then things got better.
Okay. Well, as you were flying in, what were your feelings as you were being deployed overseas?
Flying in, you say?
Into Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, we made a little stop in Hawaii. That was nice, and I proceeded to have a few cocktails, and then we got into a C-140. I think it was that, and we took off with that. I was airborne qualified, and that was I kept going to school as much as I could until I got I thought I was going to get too short to be sent to Vietnam, but no, they wouldn't. There was somebody counting the. So I went to a jump school, and I had 10 jumps, and that's all you had to have to be airborne qualified. And so it made you also feel better when you're with the 101st or you're with the 82nd, because if you don't have those wings on, they don't feel very good about you. But we didn't have the wings on anyway, because the uniforms we had didn't have those kinds of things on them. So being with the unit came over there and joined us. We didn't join them. What did I think when I got in there? So we're coming over in this, and we land in Da Nang, and that is the 90th replacement. I've heard guns, and we fired guns and that sort of thing, but there was something about those big guns that really, So I mean, in there, and I was okay on the airplane because I took adequate medication, and then we got the 90th replacement, and trying to go to sleep, and oh my gosh, it sounded like the world was. I come running out, and the sergeant's out there, and he says, "It's okay, son, they're outgoing." And I said, "This is not going to be any fun at all." So
this was in Da Nang then.
Da Nang, yeah. We're in country. Yeah.
Did you, while you were there, was there any incoming? Was there any rocket or mortar attack?
Of course, yeah. From Da Nang we went to Phu-bai, where I was stationed, and that was quite a trip. We went with in a big Huey, and. It was kind of interesting, I mean, you have the pilots there, and you have the guys with the machine guns, and so they could go right out the door with these machine guns. And I remember getting in the copter, and he said, the gunner said, he says, "Sir, you better sit on your helmet." And I said, "Why do I sit on my helmet?" He said, "Well, that way you don't get shot in the ass." So I took his word for it, and I was a second lieutenant at this point. These guys have been over there since heaven knows when. And so they look at me like, where the hell, because they usually don't know anything, the second lieutenants. And they keep sending them over, and if you want to die and you're light weapons infantry, that's what you did, is you become an officer. I mean, because they were chewing those up like it was going out of style. At one point, in fact, they asked me if I might want to go to the academy, and I said no. I said that would be a nice place to visit.
West Point, then?
Yeah. Yeah, and I have been there. I was there for a while, but
was there any bit of, I want to say culture shock, but any kind of shock when you came in country as far as the environment or obviously the sounds was something that immediately kind of got your attention? Was there anything else about being in Vietnam?
Yeah, that you were really there, and I think the gunfire is what really, because they all, if you go into a unit like that where there's all tents and they all look the same, and it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, that's the army if they're not going to spend the rest of their life there. So, well, it just looked like another, and people are carrying guns, and they look kind of serious and sweaty, and it didn't look like the best place that you might want to spend a whole lot of time. I don't like mosquitoes, and I don't like the warmth, but that was...
Fubai, where you were located, what was your introduction to not only that environment, but the people that you were going to be assigned with, working with? How was your first couple of days?
Oh, well, the first couple of days, Fubai was an airport. So it was there was 4,000 Marines there when I got there, and that changed. And then we had similar amounts, maybe of 101st or the 82nd. So when I got there and we had landed, I mean, it didn't look frightening. It didn't. I knew things were, this isn't where you should spend summer, or the Hamptons beat the hell out of this. But it didn't look terribly ugly.
Was there any special instruction from maybe someone who was an old hand there as far as do this, do that, don't do this, and advice for keeping yourself alive?
Well, yeah. Sit on your helmet. No, we had you didn't. Most of the guys that were part of ASA, they weren't carrying. Some of them did, but most of them didn't even carry guns. I mean, we had 16s and that kind of thing. You want to grab them, and I carried a 9mm because the 45s were just unbelievably bad. They were terrible. When you qualified to, and you had to as an officer with a 45, they kept saying you'd shoot at it and say, well, move up, and shoot at it, move up, because the accuracy. I could handle anybody in this room maybe from your distance, but they're awful. It's an awful
45
weapon.
Was notorious, right?
Awful
Sloppy
weapon.
Frame and...
Oh yeah. I had a friend who had a Luger, and that was great feeling gun, but it jammed a lot. I had a 9mm. And what you found over there is that people used any kind of weapon they'd like. It was sawed-off shotguns, whatever pleases you. And there was no one who really said anything to you about what you were carrying or why you were carrying it, and so on.
As part of a unit that wasn't probably supposed to be doing what you were doing overseas necessarily, were you restricted in your movements or limited in maybe you guys didn't have to do perimeter duty or patrolling or anything?
No, we didn't have to do any of those kinds of things. In fact, which was nice about the whole thing is we stayed in trailers that were air conditioned because of the radio equipment, and so you'd look out the window and say, "Gee, those guys look warm." But that is one thing that one thing that did scare me though is coming out of one of those trailers, and a lizard. It must have been 4 or 5 foot long, and it came from underneath that, and that kind of frightened me, and I went to see if the 9mm worked. But other than that, it's.
What was a daily routine once you got into the unit? What would you do on a day-to-day
Okay,
basis?
on a daily basis, I was a second lieutenant. So that means I had a squad, and the squad was one of the ditties on the that was taking information. I had a traffic analyst, and I had someone with language background. And there was a sergeant in charge of that. Now I had three of those, so I had three of those units, and then there was altogether there was about, at one time there was about 6 units. So they were focused at different at different spots. We also had a couple of people that would string wire. That was exciting with a top secret clearance, running around stringing wire so that we can. I didn't do it, and so that's. And it was easy to make rank because there was not that many of us, and there was a lot of need for it. Did
your unit grow while you were there? Did you have
more? Oh yes.
Yeah,
because it grew because you had both North Vietnamese coming down. We were 40 clicks from DMZ, so we weren't that far from what was going on across the line. And there were Chinese over there, the red Chinese, but now they're just killing us at the toy counter. They were there, and we got information on them. We were constantly in contact with NSA. Now, NSA was, I found it very interesting that I knew, I was a constant reader, and I never really read anything about it. I think maybe in the Reader's Digest, something about this group that the United States wouldn't even admit that they had. But NSA was not really. Was not under the command of the CIA. It was separate, and as a group, it was a very secretive group.
For the benefit of our camera, NSA stands for
the National Security Agency.
So your intel. Which was
we're intel. We wear that brass when we're in the United States. Yeah.
And was that considered like battlefield intelligence, theater intelligence, or even higher?
That was just intelligence. I mean, you wore intelligence brass if you did those things, but there was nothing to tell. No one would know that you were ASA unless in the United States you would wear a patch. There was a patch of an eagle with holding lightning bolts, and that's the only way they would could tell that you were ASA. And
another insignia I've seen from photos of Vietnam was a bat. Was any of your units have a yellow bat symbol?
A yellow bat.
Must have been another ASA.
Yeah, there was a Marine Corps that had something like that, but a bat. Oh, that could very well have been. It could very well have been. We had they didn't wear them in Vietnam though. There was none of those. So you didn't wear any patches or anything. Nobody knew your name, and that's.
So, if questioned by maybe a member of the Marines that were there, where's your name? Where's your rank? Did you have?
The rank was on. We had a rank on, but that was about it. And the Marine Corps, we said we're testing these radios out, which they knew was. It wasn't the truth because the way we came in and the way we went out and that sort of thing. The Marines were okay. I mean, they were, we were up on kind of a hill, and then going down the hill, there were these things called claymores. You've heard of claymore mines?
Claymore anti-personnel mines.
You what?
Anti-personnel mines.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and basically it was facing away from you, and they shot out little round balls, and so what they would do is in the evening sneak up and turn them around. So it could be the case that you were shooting at yourself. Anyway, they had Marine Corps there, and there was and in the evening you would get you'd get fire. I mean, there were you could they had light mortars and that sort of thing. They didn't have a lot of on the other side. They didn't have a lot of big armor. They didn't have a lot of big of anything. I mean, they would be hiding in holes,
So occasionally, how often would you get mortar or rocket attacks?
Oh, evening, or you don't know what's what's going on. You'd ask somebody of what's going on.
What was it like the first time that you were subjected to that?
I really, and maybe it was the silliness of somebody my age, but I really felt secured with it. I mean, this base wasn't small. We had a little part of it, but it was a to carry 4,000 Marines. I mean, you've got things, you've got tents, and you've got a lot of people there. So you felt a little, but it could be the case if they ever found a plane that it would be a little dangerous, I would think, for them to come in. And yes, there were some nights that you would find that you felt a little bit uneasy with the whole situation. There was a lot of drugs. I was an officer, and yeah, I didn't do drugs. Anyway, I mean, like Clinton, I didn't inhale. Pardon me.
Did that create discipline problems among the men that you supervised?
Well, light weapons infantry. They would go out on little maneuvers, and when they came back, they smoked and they drank and they did anything imaginable, and nobody said anything about it. And they played loud music, and every time I hear the Doors, which you probably don't know who they are, but the Doors reminds me of Vietnam and that sort of thing.
Did you give the infantry a wide berth when they were back off these patrols, or did you feel?
Oh no! They weren't after you. They just wanted to have a good time. But these and there was then I made first lieutenant, so that they could give me more than one of these units that I was going to supervise. And so that's where we were making. I mean, you're making all kinds of grade, and that was true for the people. The people who were over there. I mean, everybody was a sergeant at least, and
with the intelligence that was coming in, you had people decoding it, you had people translating it, and you were reading it.
Well, first there would be a traffic analyst who would say, "Geez, this looks," and then they would come as time progressed. Then they would come to me and say, "What do you think about this?" And so there's with little things. Now, if we could call in a copter or something, then we could do that ourselves. But it all had to be reported to NSA. Because NSA, the way I picked, when I went to Arlington Hall, it was that way. I mean, they had people that they were just looking at what was going on. So what we reported, and it had to be reported on a regular basis, whether we were hearing anything or not. They knew what was going on.
Your intel went directly to NSA, or did any of that?
A lot of times it did go directly to NSA. Yeah, I could tell when it was when it took a number of clicks to get there, that it was probably NSA.
Did you feel that some of this information should have gone maybe to the troops in the field or the combat units around you?
No. They were not in that area close enough to where the radio information that we were getting was coming from. Now, we did have an idea of where the Marines or the whoever where they were. Now, if that was a problem, and we're getting radio through the triangulation, and we know where these people are, then we'd call in and we'd talk about that, because you don't want to, and it's happened, to call in fire on your own people. I mean, so you made sure that they were back before you. I mean, B-52s are they start dropping that stuff. I remember the movie. I can't remember the movie. Where was this colonel, and he got up and he said, "Oh, morning, I love the smell of napalm." I think it was Apocalypse Now, but I can't remember. Anyways, that crazy guy, and there was a smell to it too.
Did you encounter any of those crazy kind of types?
Oh yeah, you'd have to be to really enjoy this. Even less than officers were enjoying it. Well, a couple of people were paying back for because his brother was killed and that kind of thing. And there were other people that just enjoyed this. They just enjoyed this. They were the same people that we'd have in jail over here, because they would be doing things that I really believe and it may be a function of the genetics or whatever. But you find that a lot of people that are in jail now, for one thing or another, they reach about the end of their 20s, beginning of their 30s, and they just don't do those things anymore. And I have, our testosterone, I hate to tell you, our testosterone, about 35 years of age, starts going down. And with that is that violence, that that whole thing. So, and we probably did have a lot of people in the service that would have been in jail if they were at home, and they enjoyed it. But it's not something you might enjoy for an evening, but for a long time, I can't see them enjoying it. But
with your background then in neuropsychology, did you ever just sit back sometimes and look at it all as one grand sociological kind of experiment?
Oh, of course, yeah. And then we had all kinds of. They had Stars and Stripes, which was ridiculous. But you would get newspapers from home, and you knew these things were not true, that were on the newspaper. For example, Johnson was constantly telling everybody that we're winning, and the Secretary of Defense, he said everything was hunky dory, and General, and I can't remember pardon me.
Westmoreland.
Oh yeah, body counts. We didn't. but everybody else had to give body counts. So they wonder why this guy goes in and takes a whole village out. I don't wonder why they did it at all.
That kind of psychology of
Oh,
death?
of course. And you were, the only reason that he got in trouble for it is somebody reported it. When we were in the copter going from Da Nang to Fubai, this guy's swinging out, shooting people in the rice fields. And they didn't have any guns. They were just working the fields. He said to me, I said, what were they doing? He said, nothing right now, but some bitches tonight will be after us. I said, okay. So they were part of the body count, and that was going up to Westmoreland, and then Westmoreland was giving it to the what's his name, the Secretary of Defense, McNamara, that sweetheart, who was lying like a son of a bitch. And I don't know if you've read his book, but it's unbelievable what he knew and what he continued to do and what Johnson continued to do. I mean, that was unbelievable.
You had a unique perspective to that. Then you're inside, being able to sift through this intelligence and know exactly what the situation was in some respects. Did you have moments of aha when you read this intel?
Well, it just would make you wonder that if we were doing so well, and they had the country believing they were doing so well, that why am I getting all of this traffic? There was was a trail that they came down, and you could tell they were coming down the trail. I mean, you got all kinds of noise going on. There was a time when I think that we could have done it, but after the Tet, we really did some work. We really did some things, and if we continued after that, I think that we could have done better than we. And I was a bit of a Republican at the time. I was a Republican before Bush the second, and then there was no way I could ever. I mean, I felt that man. Oh, never mind. That was just terrible, and I, no, never mind that. It was. They're not telling the whole truth, because things like this do not happen, and you don't get these kinds of things going on when you're winning. And they would also lie about the body count of what we lost.
Did you have any chance to interact with Vietnamese? Any of the people?
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
Did you get a sense from interaction with them that we were winning any of the hearts and minds?
Well, you never knew. I mean, you didn't know what you were doing. All I remember is Didi Mao, which means get out of here, but not in such a nice terminology. I think there was some abusive words involved. And you didn't. I mean, you really didn't. You weren't really friendly with the. You'd turn around and they'd blow somebody up. I mean, it wasn't to trust them as wasn't. And then you had constantly the uppers are talking about gooks and they're no good and kill the gooks and And so, I mean, it all went together, and you certainly didn't have any Vietnamese that were helping you, although there was that's what we were supposed to do. The same thing we were supposed to do in Iraq. Give them this training and then leave. And the Vietnamese didn't do that. I mean, they wanted to live and didn't want to do this. I mean, they've been fighting for heaven knows how long. It was the French before us. It was.
I think it's, one isolated incident, but maybe emblematic of the conflict. Your earlier story about the door gunner shooting at random.
And there was nobody going to report him. He was shooting people on the. I don't think anybody was going to report him. No. And for that matter, you got to a point where you're glad you had him. And you start reporting people for doing things like that, and you find out that you're not as protected as you would have been otherwise. Now that didn't happen to me, but that was understood.
Do you ever hear any instances of fragging?
Oh, yeah. Well, what would happen is you've got these shave tails. They got the one gold bar on. They just came out of Fort Jackson, and they fly them right over there to take care of these guys that have been here for 9 months, shooting at these people, hiding in the woods and hiding in the jungles, and he says, "Okay, guys, let's do." And it's stupid. And I didn't have any. I wasn't involved in that, but he would take them in there, and they would not know. They would look at it and say, "This isn't right. I mean, this just isn't right." And they would tell him, and
So self-preservation perhaps was
motivating.
Yeah.
It wasn't to be a head of a platoon. It wasn't the best thing to do for. I don't know what they said. Is it like 20 minutes? It's probably ridiculous, but I can remember them saying, a second lieutenant who's in light weapons infantry, they've got the chances of every 20 minutes or so, it lasting. I don't know what it was, but it was something very ugly, and I believe the ugliness, but I don't believe that. Yeah. The officers that seemed to be most successful were more like the troops, only they were smarter. If you know what I mean.
Yeah,
it's he's one of us, and he knows, and he's been there. Well, if he didn't get killed, he has to be smarter than. It wasn't the best place to be.
And the men under your command, you didn't have any problems with them. Granted, it was not a combat unit, but.
Oh well, of course. I mean, once in a while, some guy, tells me to. You get tired of sitting there and listening to that crap all day long. And I say, well, you got another 2 hours because what's his face has got some jungle fever or something, and and then you get. Maybe I gave out 2 Article 15s, and that's a slap on the hand. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I mean that wasn't a problem. That wasn't a problem. But to show them that I came in and I wasn't a captain. So when I came in, I was there with them, and so most of the people at the end were not there. Were not there before I got there. If you know what I mean. Yeah.
They rotated out.
Yeah, they rotated out, and that's a problem I saw in the war, and that is there was none of this. We could, we sit together in here and we talk about our family and that kind of thing, and then you're short time and you're going to leave next week, and then we got somebody new coming in. That really was not the best way to handle it. and to move people in and out individually, but rather to move them in and out as a group.
So unit cohesion then.
Oh yeah, it was very
suffered.
important, but yet they didn't think much of it. So all you were thinking about is how short am I? I've got 58 days or 33 days, or except we had a little R&R about 6 months into it.
Where did you go for that?
I went to Hong Kong, and they are still after me for the motorbike that somehow became missing in the situation. No, they're still after me, but I had problems with the motorbike.
My dad was in Hong Kong in the Navy in 53, 52, and had a problem with the taxi. So
yeah, it's a good place. I mean, it's a very you didn't worry about getting.
So when you went on R&R, did you go as a group or did you go individually?
No, went individually, because you had only been there. I mean, unless you came in together after your 6 months wasn't up.
Yeah.
And I had to go late because they couldn't get somebody to replace me for that amount of time. And then you'd hear the stuff about the United States, and you'd get angry at that.
So we can pick this up. We'll take a short break and let Jeff change tape, and then we'll explore that a little bit as far as your break, what you did on R&R, and maybe some other aspects of relaxation, as it were, in the vacation tropical paradise.
Maybe you need a saucy blonde, and you're supposed to, get into the reception line at the White House. That might help.
I never did anything like that. Yeah.
We'll look into that for you. At least we could do, right?
They wanted me to stay, though. I was.
Okay. We'll go through the introductory material again. Today is December 7th, 2009. We're at the campus of Ball State University for the Oral History Workshop. We're continuing our interview with Dr. Raymond Dean. And briefly, if I can back up, we're going back in time. And if I can ask you, where and when were you born?
Okay. I was born in Troy, Troy, New York. And that is in an area which is near Albany, New York, and Schenectady, New York. And there are about 3 or 4 cities that are all melded together. But that was the capital of New York State. So it's funny that people, when you say you're from New York, they can see you're part of the that gangs with switchblades. But no, it was.
What year were you born?
September 24th. 1946.
When we concluded the previous tape, we were talking about R&R and relaxation and, being in a stressful situation for a while. Was your only outlet, or were you just waiting for that 3-day break or 5-day break, or did you have other outlets for recreation and entertainment while you were there?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Army Security Agency. I'm almost proud of them. They are they were maybe they still are, I don't know, the top 10% IQ in the Army. That's not very difficult now, but maybe it was then. So what I'm meaning is, talking to people that I worked with, it wasn't this and that and that sort of thing. So that was a certain amount of entertainment. We also had movies, there was always the feeling, that edgy feeling, like something may happen, and so that was a difficulty was a difficulty for me. There were some of my people were using drugs. Quite a bit of drugs. I mean, smoking pot quite a bit. And I really didn't say anything unless I saw something at work that this is really this shouldn't happen, and then we had a talk, because I think that there is a point where I don't want these guys to go haywire. For a while, towards the end, I was intelligence officer. That if you had somebody at a top secret clearance and they were acting a little bit screwy, wetting the bed or doing whatever, I would come in and talk to him, and then from that interview, we'd make the decision of whether he should stay or not. There was the notion that there was $10,000 on the head of everybody who had a top secret clearance. I don't know if that's true, and don't know of anybody that's been just come back with $10,000, which was a lot of money then, but it's not right now. So yeah, there was pressure, but you did feel very a bit comfortable with the people that you had guarding you, and so
felt secure.
The security. Well, but anything could happen. When you'd hear about something, anything could happen, and you knew that.
In a war zone, yeah.
Right. But it was awfully nice to be right there at a landing field, because you had it well protected, and you could leave upon occasion if you had to, and that was.
Were you, when you're in your time in Vietnam, were you ever sent out towards maybe a remote base, or were you kept under pretty close watch? Well,
we were on Phu Bai, and that's where I was. I was in Da Nang I went down to Da Nang for a while because they were short on somebody, and then I went into Saigon for a while. And to tell you the truth, I felt more comfortable in Phu Bai, which was at the DMZ, than I did in the other, especially Saigon. I didn't feel comfortable in Saigon, and the reason for it is other people felt comfortable with and drinking and and fooling around with women. I felt that was, I'm hardly a prude, but I didn't think that was the way to live and get back home, because there was all kinds of things going on. And towards the end in Saigon, it was very bad. Whereas in the beginning, it was the difficulty between they had the takeover, and then the security in Da Nang was just not what I would feel comfortable with. Yeah. So I was there as a diplomatic courier, they called it, and so I got stuff and flew in an F-15, and that was interesting, and the fellow knew I had never, and these things were unbelievable, and nauseating. I mean, you'd get off the runway and you just go off, and so I'm holding on to these things I'm supposed to report to Da Nang,
so they flew you down in a fighter jet.
Yeah, they did most of instead of there was something called MATS, military air transport, and you can get a ride on one of those planes if you're going to, if you've got time off or something, but you don't ask for a 3-day pass when you're up there. I mean, it just just don't do that. This wasn't mats. This is it was cheaper for me to be to go up with a fighter.
And time. It was time-sensitive information, perhaps?
Well, to my knowledge, I have no idea. Believe me, I didn't open it. Yeah. What do you got in here, anyway? Yeah, this looks like a big one, Jack. What is this? No, I just kept my mouth shut and just... and naturally, I was flying second seat, which is it's not a... so we got there, and it was, for...
So... I was, in my research prior to this interview, I came across a novel called One to Count Cadence. I didn't know if you were familiar with that book. It was a novel about ASA troops in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. The first person who died in the Vietnam War was Spec 4 Davis, and he was ASA.
Well, one of the descriptions of ASA men in this, in one reviewer, said that the men were intelligent but antisocial. Did you find that to be true, or do you?
Oh, I found that to be true, and I was, because you're not supposed to be talking to anybody that are now antisocial. I don't know, as a psychologist, I have problems with that. I don't antisocial, but certainly asocial. Meaning I don't want to spend a lot of time with you. I don't know who you are, and I don't want to talk to you unless I know who you are. So if that's asocial or antisocial, then yeah, you were told to do that. Yeah, unless you were among your people.
And that probably is maybe some of the reason why you were maybe looked at that way. But you had that code that you weren't allowed to talk.
Right. And what you were supposed to do if you're over there and a guy's married and he cheats on his wife, you're supposed to tell people that. That wasn't something I ran around looking for. Anything that could be used against him. To get him to say or do something that was not something that was supposed to be done, then you were supposed to tell, and that's the reason why. Homosexuals were not in the. They weren't supposed to be in ASA for the same reason. Not for not for the reason of the what your sexual interests were, but they could use that. They could use that against you. This was especially true. You saw it at Fort Devens. What
were the backgrounds of the men that probably were there at Fort Devens with you taking this training? Were they educated like yourself?
They probably, the vast majority of them had some college. The vast majority. But we had high schoolers also. The people who would take who would go through the training as in code. I mean, I couldn't do it. I mean, you'd hear these da-da-dit. And then they'd have to scream out "Alpha," and they did this day after day after day, and I couldn't imagine doing that. And then the PX, they had 3-2 beer, and you couldn't even get a buzz because the beer was so. But it was 21. Unlike New York, you had to be 21 to drink, and so I couldn't drink, but I could drink at the PX, which. Yeah.
The people on your team, you had the language translators and the DIT-dots?
DIT-dots, yeah, ditty boppers or whatever the heck they called themselves, yeah. Code people. That's crazy.
And then the traffic
analyst. A traffic analyst,
with
right.
Different skills. Now, did they get along as a team, or did did the traffic analysts tend to hang together? What was the social?
Traffic analysts tended to be the in charge of the whole thing. Like that doesn't make sense. Would you go back and get that again? Everything was recorded also. So if you missed, and it's possible, you know, if you missed some, you could go back, or somebody else could go back and reanalyze the material, and so they would get. I mean, you know, people got you know, but there was the general feeling that it's not only the relationship that we have with these people who want to kill us. It's the relationship that we have with the other people who are not ASA, and that was, you know, that was hard. We tried to stay away from them, and but we weren't. You know, it's just something you were supposed to do. Right. What the hell you guys really do over there? Oh, you playing with each other? What's going on? So it was a. If you get some pictures of it, where the main command structures, they had a white picket fence around the command structure. It was kind of funny.
Somewhat surreal, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that was the reason they did it. I mean, there was a lot of time you had nothing to do, you know.
Mm-hmm. Shoot, I had a question in my mind, and then I seem to have forgotten it. You had bunkers.
Bunkers?
Did you have some form of protection in case of rocket or attack? You sandbagged anything? Sandbagged? Or?
Oh well, they did. The Marine Corps and those people, they had something put you below ground, and we had the same. We would go with them if it got that bad.
Did you ever have to do that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Was that scary, exciting?
Well, the thing that was scary about it is, are they going to break through? And that's the scary part. And also, you know, you could hear them coming in, and that wasn't. I didn't like that very much. And then we would call in, and there would be some airplanes in the sky coming off of one. See, we were right near the coast, so we got carriers, and we'd have the smaller planes come in and try to do some damage on them.
Were you given any instruction as far as, okay, if the enemy does break the perimeter, you men that had top secret clearance in your unit, were you given any special instructions as far as what to do, where to go? Yeah. Can you describe that?
Yeah. Well. Also, we didn't have shredders. Well, if they did, they probably held. We were in Washington. What we did have is our bags that were red, and these bags were burn bags, and they had to be burned every day. So we kept as little paper as we needed to. So you'd put it in the burn bag, and then you'd have to go. You and somebody else would have to go and burn it in these incinerator kinds of things. Other than that, some of the tapes and that sort of thing, they would be taken care of. You know, just the explosion.
As you were sorting the intelligence traffic that was coming in, did any mention of your unit or your location come up to where you got the impression that the enemy knew you were there?
Oh, well, they knew we were there. I mean, they would have had to have been completely idiotic. It was the radio research. I mean, come on. We were the eighth radio research, and some idiot made a huge placard that's what it said on it. I mean, it was, and they all knew it. I mean, the people that were guarding us, but they were quite respectful of if you were airborne qualified or not.
In your unit, were you one of the few that were airborne qualified?
I was one of the few. Yeah. And the reason for that is so that we could get into their units. We're not going to take care of you. You don't know how to do anything. They really want. So we were. I couldn't jump anymore because the one leg got really mashed up it didn't get mashed up. Some of the cartilage got broken up, and he says, "You're going to have trouble with this in the future. You didn't want to go to the doctor either. You didn't want to go to the doctor." And the dentist was worse. That was not something you had to do, or you wanted to do. I remember when I got back, I had some tooth problems, and the dentist said, "You're in the service, weren't you?" I said, "Well, yeah. Why?" I said, "Well, geez." I guess the dentists there weren't the best.
So that word got around.
Oh,
Information
yes.
like that, don't go to the doctor, don't go to the dentist.
Well, the dentist was one thing. I mean, that is more of an elective procedure. Mm-hmm. But if you got shot in the arm, I'm not going to go to the I'm not going to go to the guy down the street. I'm going to go to the whatever doctor. But like maybe a sick call, that kind of thing. Go to that and get a shot and hope that took care of it. But we got all kinds of shots going over there. It was unbelievable.
And when your time was done and you came home, can you kind of describe your feelings when you were short and you're counting?
Short timer? Well, see, short timers always get killed. So it's a bad time and a good time because you're going home, but that's when they get killed. And so you don't say anything to anybody. But I felt good. I felt good about that. But I was going to. Then I just made. I made captain just before. About 3 months, and then I was going to Arlington Hall, Virginia, and that's where NSA was, so I found it to be exciting to actually see what was going on there. Of course, they were trying to get you to re-up, mm-hmm. But I would have had to take some kind of phenothiazines to re-up. And then we didn't want to re-up, and they were willing to take us on in the NSA. I don't know about that either. I said, you guys took me. This was a fun thing, but I often you always remember the things that are fun or interesting or whatever. And I've said to myself numerous times lately, what would it have been like if I had stayed? Yeah, but.
Did you consider it or just dismiss it out of hand?
Well, we were all in a auditorium, and real brass came in, with the stars on. And he told us how valuable we were and all of this stuff. And I asked, how many of you people are really going to stay with us? And then they booed him and all kinds of things like that. I mean, it wasn't something. If they were, if they knew what the hell they were doing, it may have been a possibility. But things at that time, it was so obvious that things were so bad that. Westmoreland would come in and they'd clean everything up, and it was a mess. It was a mess. And then that fool we had over there with with Iraq. I mean, what is wrong? I mean, it was the same thing, but he. Have you seen the movie W, which nobody will be able to get by the time they? Oh my gosh! I mean, I thought it was going to be funny, but it really wasn't. It was pathetic.
And that kind of took you back to.
Oh yeah, it took me back
40
to
years.
to Johnson, and because I had read about Johnson, and I had read also what's his name's book, and he cried when he talked about the book. He should have cried. I mean, to send men over there to purposely get killed when they know they're not going to be able to win. Now, people may say this guy's crazy, but I would have said there would have been no North Vietnam if I was working the White House. I just, what they were worried about is if they do that, then they've got China, and this not, well, you guys are history people, but how they could have believed in this domino effect is really quite beyond me. But is that not what they're thinking in the Middle East right now? If we let this one go, then they got Iran coming down, and then let's go back to Afghanistan, and we got Obi-Wan Kenobi there in the White House, and he's going to do everything for us, but I don't see anything changing. If all he has to do is say peace, and he wasn't even president, and he gets to walk overseas and get a prize for peace. I don't know. He talks a lot, but I haven't seen the. Well, I've seen my retirement. I'll be a bit, but it's
your turn to cry.
It's almost back to yeah.
Did you, when you came back?
Yeah.
Did you go back to school right away, or did you take time?
I went. I spent some time at Arlington Hall. As a civilian, and that was the time I was kind of thinking about staying in, but no, I couldn't have done that. So then I said, I got to go back to school. What are you going to do with your life? Are you going to run around and look for people who are doing things that they're not, or and we were doing things outside of CIA. The CIA was not involved with anything that we were doing. Well, anything, I don't know. Maybe they would have a talk, but CIA. They would, give the president a review of the world, I guess, every morning. But we were not even thought to exist, and some of the things that were going on with them were just quite different.
And you were there at NSA for how long?
I don't know, maybe 6 months.
Okay.
And it was really more of a training, not training me, training other people as to what that's all about. And Arlington Hall, Virginia, it's kind of in a sleepy little hollow in there. Yeah, it's like the CIA's, they call it the farm for them, but Arlington Hall was the
equivalent for the NSA.
Yeah.
Then. Did you go right back into neuropsychology?
Well, something I did do while I was over there is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the now I'm going to forget about that. Forget that name. Anyway, you took these exams, and with these exams, you'd get 3 credit hours or whatever it is, and I ended up with 30 credit hours coming out of the army. now it's driving me crazy. That it was a PL. I can't remember what it was, but I think they still have it. And you basically need a book, and you read the book, and you go take a multiple choice test, and you can get the. So I got about 30 hours on that, and that was yeah.
That was kind of a boost to your education when you went back.
Yeah,
You didn't feel
yeah.
like you'd lost.
I could bring. Yeah, at least they had a year. Basically, a year I could take with me.
So that was a positive aspect, I guess, of your service. Were there other attributes of your service that you felt?
Yeah, they paid. Well, they paid for. They paid. When it wasn't as much as they paid during the Second World War, but they paid you for going
back to school.
Yeah, yeah. Now it's driving me crazy. The name of that.
You'll think of it too.
Yeah.
You can call me.
The college, something or another. I cannot remember that. But it was interesting. I mean, you read a book and go take these multiple choice tests, and they get 3 hours, and so that was interesting. And then I went back into a more neuroscience, physiological kind of thing, and the fellow who was who was really my mentor, he said, if there's anything that they don't need out there is experimental people like us. And you might think before you choose a PhD program that anything clinical, you've got something nice set up for you, but the experimentation is. I mean, there wasn't as many jobs open.
So which way did you go?
Oh, I definitely clinical. I went clinical. There's a fellow by the name of Ralph Raytan, who is the guru in the United States of the, and he was then of something called neuropsychology. And I went to Phoenix and worked with him, and he did me well. And I taught at the University of Wisconsin, and then I taught at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and then I went to Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, and then there was a provost here who was who some people may have heard of, but not like I did. And he heard me talk in St. Louis and asked me if I might not want to come to Ball State University. And his name was Jim Cook. And it's interesting that he moved from here, or was thrown out, I don't know which. And he went to some place in North Dakota, South Dakota, and then he went to I think it was Old Dominion University, and his second in command there was a woman by the name of Gora, and so
it's kind of come semi-full circle.
Kind of an interesting, always 6 connects from the, and he was an interesting fellow from a history point of view. When I had dinner at his house, and he showed me his study, and there was he collected Nazi memorabilia, and he tried to convince me that the Nazis and the SS were really no different than our Marine Corps, and I found that kind of an interesting.
I think historically we could disprove that.
Well, I wasn't in a place I was going to do that. We've got this distinguished professor that I'm getting, and a boost in money, and I probably would have left Ball State had I not a divorce, and the only way I was going to see my kids is to stay here. So now I'm too old to really do much, but I have more fun with my students who go on to get doctorates than I do. I mean, that's the fun of teaching.
It's kind of nice to nurture those
Yeah,
young
it is a
minds
paternal kind of thing. One thing they can't take away from you, and that is your students and your pubs. So everything else they can take away from you.
Is there anything I failed to ask you, or?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me about my childhood, and I was glad you didn't, because that was an ugly part. But as it goes, Dad was in the service, and he was quite an ugly fellow, but that's about the only thing that you didn't ask.
Okay. Well, I think Michael told me to avoid certain things, so.
I had to get that in. I don't want anybody to think well of him.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dean, for coming here and meeting with us today. I greatly appreciate it, and I know our project is the better for it. And thank you for your